I would like to welcome you to this workshop on research funding by the European Research Council. My name is Panos Desilas, and this is the first week in post as Euram's VP Research Funding. So this is one of the first initiatives that we are taking. And this is really one of a series of initiatives with an aim of exploring different opportunities for obtaining research funding, funding for management research. And one question that perhaps we want to address and start exploring is whether there is a funding gap in terms of management research. So perhaps the presidents of Euram will be able to comment on that in the future. This is one of the first initiatives focusing on perhaps the leading European organization about funding excellent research. Perhaps I can share my slide where it shows, because we focus on opportunities from the European Union, the program Horizon Europe that last started in 2021 and it lasts until 2027. So let me share my screen. So today we are really on the on pillar 1, which is looking at the and we will be focusing on the European Research Council, and in the future we will have opportunities to look at global challenges and innovative Europe pillars 2 and 3. So what we have tried to do today is to put together 3 different sides of the process for obtaining funding by ERC. On the one hand, we have the ERC office. Then we have the view of the applicants, in this case, successful applicants, award holders. And then we have the view of a member, a past member, a former member of an ERC panel in the evaluation of applications. So the idea is to start with some introductory comments by Professor Duran and Moslane as Euram's past and current president, then move on to Jerko Markovina, who will be talking about the application and evaluation processes. Then we will move on to Professors Diestre and Retenzi that have successfully applied for funding, and they will be hopefully helping us demystify the process and understand how to demonstrate rigor, feasibility, and significance. And then Professor Schotter will be talking about his view as a past panel, having served on the panel of ERC. Then we hope to have about 20-25 minutes for Q&A with participants and panel. And finally, Professors Durand and Moslane will be making some providing some final thoughts and making some closing remarks. So without any further delay, each speaker can talk for about 8 minutes, and we can have 1 or 2 questions if there are burning questions or clarifying questions, so that we can have at the end a 20-minute Q&A session with everyone together. So I'll stop sharing my screen. And without any further delay, I would like to invite Euram's presidents to begin the session and set the background.
Please, Thomas, you as past president have usually the first step, but I'm very happy to welcome you all. My name is Katrin Möslein, current president of Euram, and I'm really grateful, Panos, that you put together this panel. And I would like to, first of all, thank all panelists for contributing. I think this is a really important initiative for management research, because we all know that ERC grants are a real success story. A real success story in research funding, and when it all started in 2007, that was much less clear. But this format of investigator-driven frontier research that is really driven bottom-up and highly competitive has proven highly attractive and highly fruitful. And with now more than 10,000 ERC grantees, and that's really impressive, with more than 10,000 ERC grant holders, it's a powerful basis for future development. And I guess as for all grant schemes, different disciplines might be or might feel represented in different ways, or in different might feel they have different representations in a grant scheme. But in my view, this is a hen and egg problem. It's a hen and egg problem because it always depends on awareness and engagement and awareness. And what we want to create with this panel is more awareness among European management researchers and more engagement among European management researchers for the ERC grant scheme. And that's why I'm so grateful, as I said, to all panelists to contribute and provide information to everybody to see how valuable it is and it can be for management researchers. Just my short introduction, and I immediately hand over to Thomas Durand, past president of Euram.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you to all for being here with us, here in the sense virtually. I would like to contribute here by trying to put the discussion in context. As a research domain, the field of management and business studies has several characteristics that we should keep in mind in our discussion. Of course, feel free to discuss these items and disagree with me, but I'm going to list them. And I've written the points so for the sake of time. Panels, don't worry, I have 7 points, but it should be okay within the timing. 1, the field is a young field in science, young. Depending on how one looks at it, it's 2 centuries, 1 century, 50, 30 years old, depending, whatever. Doesn't really matter. In any case, it's a very young field. The kind of the last kid in the family. As a result, it is somehow belittled by other domains of science. Those are more established, institutionalized, more mature. 2, the field of management is part of social sciences. We know that hard sciences tend to question the scientificity of what they regard as, how should I say, softer domains. In French, we have the word science exacte. So exact science, meaning, there's a truth out there, there's a reality. With social sciences, it's more complex. Some still view business schools with no or anecdotal research, where seasoned practitioners would come to tell the students the stories of their career again and again, with no or little reflexive thinking or conceptualization. There may have been some truth to it 40 years ago, but this era is gone. 3rd, the field of management aims at studying organizations, including businesses. As a result, the field is too often seen as compromised to capitalism and complicit in shareholder value generation, environmental externalities, and the like. 4th, in most EU and OECD countries, the field of management and business studies represents the first domain of study at graduate level, with between 15 to 20% of student enrollment. Families and students understood that studying business led to jobs, well-paid, qualified, and good careers. As a result, enrollment in other disciplines, for example, economics, fell drastically. 5th, management research may be important for economic development. It feeds management education to help firms' competitiveness, driving prosperity and employment. By training the cohorts of future managers at the frontier of knowledge in management, the field can leave a significant positive footprint on society and the well-being of populations. This is our claim, seen from management. 6, business schools are cash cows for their corporate universities because they generate revenues from a solvable market: executive education, MBAs, DBAs, some specialized masters in management, and even in the US, donation from the alumni, etc. Yet, paradoxically, management research lacks funding, badly lacks funding. Firms fund management education, but not so much research. This is reinforced by the existence of a large management consulting sector, about 60 billion euros turnover in the EU, which companies tend to rely upon for developing managerial techniques rather than funding contract-based academic research in management. 7th, the field has been and is still dominated by the US, despite significant catching up in the EU over the last 20 years or so. This is not neutral because management education conveys political, economic, and social representations of the world and specific views on the way firms should operate in our economies. The cocktail of all the above turns out to be rather toxic for management research, I think. Last kid in the family of social sciences, belittled by the other research disciplines, accused of being compromised when most other social sciences tend to be critical to capitalism, as if there was no criticism expressed in management research. I mean, come to a Euram conference and you will see it's different. Already funded by industry through revenues of executive education, but not for research. Stealing students from other disciplines, a field still dominated by the US controlling of the key journals. Well, well, well. In short, we need support and help, badly. Now, a last word directed to our ERC colleagues and the grantees we have here, just to understand what we could do about it jointly. Scientifically, the field did borrow actively from adjacent fields. Yet, contrary to often held claims, management is not economics applied to enterprises. It is not either sociology of organizations, nor is it anthropology of production or psychology applied to industrial context. Even if, in the early days, as a new scientific domain, management was a bit of all of the above, borrowing concepts and theories from adjacent fields with its share of bricolage, like any other field. Over the past 20 years, management researchers have thrived to develop novel, solid theoretical pillars specifically fit to the needs of the field. Consolidating these foundations need to be actively pursued and is at the top of the management community's research agenda today. This is something that Euram can contribute to. In this context, ERC is a blessing, precisely because ERC is focused on basic, fundamental upstream research. Yet, to fulfill the needs and expectations, ERC needs to dig a bit more in learning what management researchers do and the peculiar paradoxical situation we are in. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Catherine and Thomas, for your introduction and thoughtful points and comments and views. I would like to invite now Jerko Markovina from ERC's office to demystify perhaps the process and help us understand the specifics.
Yes, thank you. I will do my best. I hope you can see my presentation, so I may start right away. So the thing I want to say first is what the ERC offers, just for those who may not know already. These are the main funding schemes in the ERC. So there is a starting grant, consolidator grant, and advanced grant, depending on the career stage of the researchers. So you can see that starting grant is 2 to 7 years since the completion of the PhD. Then the consolidator moves from 7 years to 12 years after the completion of PhD. And after 12 years, you qualify for the advanced grant. You can also see the grant amounts, which are quite generous, 1.5, 2, and 2.5 million euros over 5 years. So this is up to 5 years. Most researchers take the whole range, but you can apply for a smaller duration, shorter duration of the grant. In all 3 grants recently, there is a possibility to ask an additional 1 million of funding, which is dedicated to some extra costs of research, which is less usual in social sciences. It's for bigger equipment, for research centers, for, let's say, big field experiments. So this can be requested on top of the normal amount. And usually it's in physical sciences of life sciences when they need some large equipment, telescopes or microscopes or similar things. Let me just mention also these 2 schemes, which is we call these 3, let's say, the main grants, and there are also synergy grants and proof of concept. Synergy grant is multi-PI, so you can have up to 4 researchers on a 6-year, up to 6 years projects, and with more funding, 10 million plus up to 4 million for additional equipment. This is for, as the name says, for the synergy of more than one researcher. And recently we also introduced this rule that one researcher can also be based outside of EU or associated countries. So for example, you can make a team with American or Australian or Chinese researchers. So these are kind of bigger grants for the synergy and interdisciplinary projects. And there is a proof of concept grant, which is a grant of a smaller amount to prove something that you found in your ERC grant. So it is aimed at grant holders who want to, let's say, put their results on the market through some proof of concept that they discovered during their research. So these are the basic calls and opportunities for funding. As you know, ERC functions on the excellence as the sole evaluation criterion, and evaluators look at the excellence of the research project or the idea itself, and the excellence of the person applying, in a sense of intellectual capacity, creativity, commitment, and past achievements. This is the main ERC panel structures. We have 3 domains: life sciences, physical sciences, and social sciences. As you can see, in social sciences, we have 7 panels, and the SH7 panel was only recently introduced because SH2 panel was too big. So we have now this panel on human mobility, environment, and space. SH1 is the panel covering management, also economics and finance. So this is the structure, overall structure, and now we have 27 panels. These are the SH1 descriptors. So these are the areas of science covered by the SH1 panel, which is, as I said, economics, finance, and management. And you see I highlighted the descriptors covering management, which is SH1, 9, 10, and 11, which covers entrepreneurship, research and development, innovation, management, strategy, organizational behavior, human resources management, operations management, and marketing. So once applying, you can mark these descriptors as a field where your research fits. And this is a short overview how to apply for the ERC grant. It all starts with an excellent idea. If you have a research idea, a research program for the next 5 years, you select a call depending on your seniority, either starting, consolidated, or advanced. You should have a host institution, which is in the EU or the associated countries, which are some countries in the Eastern Europe, as you know, Norway, Switzerland, and we are in negotiations with some other countries. So a full up-to-date list is on our webpage. So all these countries are eligible to host the ERC research. After that, you choose the domain of social sciences, the panel, SH1, if it is in management, and the descriptor where exactly your subfield falls. The next part is writing your proposal. So I will just in a minute say how the proposal writing looks. Get acquainted with our online system and prepare all the documentation and submit by the deadline of the call. So how are the proposals evaluated? When we receive them, we have 2 steps. In the first step, the panel meets and reads the part B1, which is the 5-page synopsis. So this is let's say an extended abstract of the proposal, where the panel evaluates this synopsis and the CV of the applicant. If the proposal is retained, it moves to step 2, where the full proposal is read. So part B1 and part B2, which is 15 pages of the full proposal, where you describe your methodology, the team, the resources needed, the work plan, all the details. The panel meets. Unfortunately, now we had several online meetings, but usually meets in person in Brussels. And if the proposal is scored A, it is funded. It is recommended by the panel for funding. If not, the applicant receives feedback. ERC is known for that, for giving out very detailed feedback. So all the individual reviews are sent to the applicant along with the panel comment, which is the common position of the panel after the discussion. They say why the proposal was funded or why it was rejected. So the applicants receive significant feedback on the whole process. And I will just cover quickly. I'm not following the time, so please feel free to stop me, but I will just add some quick notes. What are the panel members looking? So funding frontier projects that should be beyond the state of the art, that are important and timely. Let's say we can expect a lot of proposals on pandemics now, or health economics, or something similar. And also on the point of the PI profile is it is good to show why the PI is the best person to undertake this project. Is there evidence that the PI has the capabilities to do the project and to manage a 5-year program with a substantial budget? Typical reasons for rejection is, I will just say that scope may be too narrow or too broad. So finding a balance is very important. If the research is incremental and not groundbreaking, not involving any risk or moving the frontiers, or if the principal investigator is still with insufficient track record and experience in leading projects, which is more important in the advanced grant, because in the starting grant, we don't expect people to be very experienced. We also have interviews, which will also now be introduced for the advanced grant. Before we didn't have them, but now we will have them also for the advanced grantees. And these interviews were also before in person. Now we conducted them online, but they are there and they are an important part of the evaluation, where the applicant can defend their program and answer the questions from the panel, which usually helps very much. In some cases, maybe not, but usually it helps. It helps a lot for the applicant to explain the project. So I will just say quickly to wrap up some misconceptions about ERC that are going around and maybe impede some applicants to apply. The first one is that you can apply for ERC grant if you are the very top of your profession and very successful. This is relatively true. You should have a good CV, but it's all taken in context and in relation to the stage of your career and seniority. So it is not that you have to be a Nobel Prize winner to apply. You can apply always, and all this is taken, all your CV is taken into context of your career and where you should be at the moment. To be successful, you need to continue on established research line. This is generally not true. A new groundbreaking idea where you move outside of your comfort zone and try something new is usually appreciated. So it doesn't have to be something that you already worked on. Then another thing is, if you have already obtained an ERC grant, you are more or less likely to get another one. We do have multiple grantees, so people who have got it twice or 3 times, but it doesn't matter, because in the evaluation, we always take the one at the moment without referring to having a previous ERC grant as a positive or a negative. So panels are instructed to look at it, look at the merit of the proposal at the time, not previous grants. And the more socially or medically relevant proposal is, the higher the chances of being funded. Being the funding agency that funds basic research, ERC doesn't necessarily look for societal impact or applications. It is good if they exist, but it is not a necessary criterion. So the progress of the grant can be purely scientifical, and this is something that is specific to ERC, so funding basic research, as it was previously mentioned. And you can find more information on our website, where all the details are provided. And also for any prospective applicants, I think it's a very good resource on YouTube. You just search for ERC classes, where you have short videos of my colleagues speaking about step-by-step introductions, how to get started, how to write part B1, how to write part B2, how we evaluate it, and how to prepare for the ERC interview. They're very interesting and very detailed, so check them out if you want to apply.
Thank you very much, Jerko, for this thorough overview in a short period of time.
Thank you.
Do we have 1 or 2 questions before we move on? Maybe if there is any burning question or clarification question? No? All right. So in that case, I would like to invite Louis and Maria as award holders to talk about their experiences. Louis, if you want to start with.
Sure. Thank you, Panos. Let me share my screen. All right, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. Actually, I'm going to build a lot on what Jerko was explaining. I'm going to share my experiences as an applicant to a starting grant. So I received a starting grant in 2016. So I'm still have 1 year left of life with the grant. So just to give you a bit of background of what the grant is about, and maybe give a bit of publicity on myself as well. I'm doing research on illegal sale of medicines through illegal online pharmacies, and the grant is focusing on understanding the size of the illegal market for particular medicines, and try to explain heterogeneity, why there's more activity for certain drugs than others, and explain the motivations of customers, patients to purchase drugs online, right? So explain why the price is so different. Some drugs are in general cheaper than the legal counterparts, but sometimes it's more expensive anyway. So I don't want to give too much information about this, just to just tell you the background of where I'm coming from. I'm here to share my experience and maybe provide some suggestions on how to prepare your application for an ERC grant. Many of these suggestions are not mine. I've received those and benefited from those, apparently. So I'm very happy to share them with you. And if you have any questions or any follow-up issues, I'm very happy to address them. So basically, the thing I learned when I started thinking about applying for an ERC grant was that this is very different from sending a paper for an academic journal for publication. Very different from sending a proposal to a conference. It's very different. Once I realized that this is very different, I started trying to figure out how do I prepare this application, and of course, the most important thing is what is going to be evaluated, right? And Jerko was talking about this, right? What are the criteria they're going to use to assess whether my application is worthy of funding or not? And if you start searching around, and Jerko was providing information about this, as I said, there seems to be these 3 words, which were the ones used for this Pdw, right? Which is it has to provide the application has to refer to a project that is significant, that is rigorous, and it is feasible, right? But these to me, it sounded very, very abstract. So what I did, and it's something I strongly recommend, is to actually look at the criteria. There's lots of information, and Jerko provided lots of links for that. This is one of the places where you can find this information. You can actually see what the evaluators are going to be evaluating when it comes to your proposal. So they're going to be filling up evaluation forms and giving scores on certain criteria. So if you know which criteria are going to be addressed, maybe it's easier for you to just prepare the application so that you will somehow answer the questions that are going to be asking about your application, right? Another important element is, okay, who are these people who are going to be evaluating my proposal? You know very easily, for just checking a bit of the ERC website, that basically these are academics and they're multidisciplinary, right? But what does multidisciplinarity mean? How broad are they? And again, there's lots of resources available. You can easily check the panels from the previous years. You can check the panel to which you're thinking about applying. You can see the kind of people that were there. In my case, was SH1, and you can see that when it comes to multidisciplinarity, what kind of people are going to be evaluating my project. You can see that there will be economists, there will be people with background in marketing, people with a background in finance. So this gives you a sense of how broad these people are in terms of academic disciplines, and it helps you a lot when you're thinking about rigor, feasibility, or significance, because rigor may have different meanings from people from different disciplines. So I think this was extremely useful for me. And then, as I was saying before, I want to go through the different criteria that are going to be evaluated when it comes to your application. And I'm going to give you some hints about what I learned throughout the process and the kind of recommendations or insights that I was given by previous ERC grant holders, right? So let me list here the criteria that you can easily find in many of the links that were provided already. So this is one of the questions they're going to be asking evaluators about your proposal, right? To what extent is this addressing an important challenge? Another important question they're going to be evaluating is if it goes beyond the state of the art. If it's this high risk, high gain type of proposal, then about the feasibility, can it be implemented? Then about the methodology, if it's appropriate for the projects, the goals of the project, if it's a novel methodology, and if it provides or proposes timescales and resources that are justified, right? The dotted lines over there is because the first 4 elements are part of the first evaluation process, the B1 that Jerko was mentioning. The last 3 are things that are going to be evaluated later when you present in Brussels and are part of the B2, the extended application, right? So if you look at these 7 elements, which are part of the evaluation forms, at least my year, of the evaluators, what I did is I prepared my application using each of these different elements as titles of the different sections that I was including in my application. So this way it makes it easier for the evaluators to see how I'm addressing these things by just having a section purposely devoted to address this important thing. How is my application addressing important challenges beyond the state of the art, et cetera, et cetera. So I think if we look at the first three, somehow speaks to the significance of the application. The one about feasibility obviously speaks about the feasibility of the project, and then the last three about methodological rigor, to what extent the person implementing the proposal will have the methodological rigor to do it in the right way, right? So just now, let me share with you some hints about some experiences and some learnings that I received from others and that I experienced myself. So maybe this is the most important advice, the most useful advice I received is that you better not think about these ERC applications as money for a project you were already planning to do. So I think it's not about, okay, this is my portfolio of projects. Let's see the one which I think has more impact, and I'm going to ask funding support for this project. I think this is promised because maybe significance is not thought in the same way when it comes to academic journals and this kind of ERC grants, and that you need to take into account the multidisciplinarity nature of the evaluation panel, right? So I was suggested, the advice I received was very useful, was rather than trying to see what you're planning to do and try to see which one is more significant, looking at it from the other way around. Let's try to figure out what are the most important challenges that need to be addressed at the EU, and then try to see which one of these you're more likely to contribute. So I looked at actually the EU lists the big challenges for the next 10 years or something like that, right, in their website. So I looked at those, and there was one which was about counterfeit medicines. And I've never done anything close to that. I've done research in the biopharma industry, but from the innovation side. And I thought maybe this is the challenge I can contribute the most. So these are the challenges. Let's see which one I can offer something. So that's the way I started. And I think it helps you think of this in a very different way. Now the way to show that you can go beyond the state of the art is by taking into account the multidisciplinarity of the panel, right? So for sure, this is a big challenge. There's lots of things that need to be addressed, but for sure, people in academia have talked about this. And you need to be aware of the different disciplines that are being covered in your panel, and maybe people from marketing, people from economics, people from finance, they've talked about these issues, right? So you want to be very, very broad and be very clear about what has been done already. Something has been said for sure, whatever challenge you're trying to address. But at the same time, you need to underscore the important conceptual or empirical limitations. And this speaks to the importance of the high-risk proposal, right? So if nobody has addressed these problems, it's because it's hard to address. So there must be some important conceptual or empirical challenges that preempt people without grants from addressing these problems, right? So you have to stress really the high-risk aspect of the proposal. The problem is that if you stress, this is something I face, when you stress the high risk proposal, it somehow undermines the feasibility, right? If it's so hard to address, if it's so high risk, how is it going to be feasible? So I think one of the important things you need to do with your application is to try to avoid the presence of a trade-off. The fact that it's high risk does not mean that it cannot be feasible. And I have two suggestions on how to do this. One is one suggestion I received, which is you need to propose something that even if it fails, it adds something. Even if it does not achieve the goal of showing X about this big challenge, by trying, you bring something to some knowledge or some learning that has not been there into the academic environment, right? So this is something after receiving the grant a few years later, I talked to one of the members of the panel, one of the evaluators, and he told me one of the reasons why they decided to fund my project. And he told me that they felt that something will come out of it. Even if it fails, just trying will improve our knowledge and will add something to the table that we don't have yet, right? So I think this is a way of addressing this trade-off between high-risk applications, high-risk projects, and feasible projects, right? They will add something. They will succeed in one way or the other. Something else that you can include in your application is having sort of a plan B for everything. If something fails and I'm not able to find a conceptual model that will address this, maybe there's another way of doing it. If I'm not able to get this data, maybe there's another way of getting alternative data. If I cannot measure this in this way, maybe there's another way. If I cannot show if there's endogeneity in my estimations, maybe there's this other way in which I can address this. Showing a plan B for all these things somehow allows you to break this trade-off between high risk and feasibility. And when it comes to rigor, I think this is the part that is the closest to publishing. When it comes to methodological rigor, I think that, of course, you need to take into account the multidisciplinarity nature of the panel members, but this is the part that is closest. You want to show conceptual and empirical rigor. And this is an advice also I got from some people that I think is very helpful. At that point, when you're in the part B2, when you're in Brussels interviewing with the panel, you've convinced them already that the project is worth exploring. It's more about you being the right person for this, and you want to show that you've thought about this, that you even start thinking about this, or even trying to start the project and trying to do some of the parts of the project. Important challenge, right? So I don't know if I'm over time, but this is it. If you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Thank you for lifting the curtain and sharing the the process through which you went by. It was very revealing. So any questions before we move on to the next talk, or we can always return to this very thoughtful presentation. So Maria would like to, oh, sorry, Thomas, please go ahead.
Just a quick one, Luis. Excellent presentation, very clear, and it helps a lot. How much time did you spend preparing the bid?
A lot. So I was thinking about preparing for a specific year. I worked and I didn't make the timeline, so I kept working the next year. So I would say that this amounts to like a paper, like a full academic paper you're thinking about sending to SMJ, to whatever. So I would say that it's almost as much as that.
Any other questions for Louis?
Maybe a quick one, Louis, very impressive, really great. And I think for me, the very important message was how important the challenge is and the importance of the challenge. And you said, check the panel, it helps a lot. And I was thinking, in our discipline, the reaction is often check the panel and it will frustrate you a lot because it might be more the outside. If the whole focus is about the challenge and solving a problem, then maybe the discipline doesn't matter so much. Is that the right perception? What is that?
So I don't know if maybe I lost you a little bit in the end, but I think I understood the question. So I think both things are true. I mean, seeing the panel the first time was frustrating because it means that they were so diverse that, I mean, economists, people from marketing, people from management. So you need to somehow address the perceptions or fill up the expectations of all of them, right? So in the beginning it was frustrating, but at a certain point, once you assume that this is the way it is, I think it was very helpful. In my case, I realized that there might be people from marketing there. I'm talking about marketing specifically because when it comes to my project, this forced me to look into a literature. I found a very interesting literature in the psychology dimension of marketing that were asking people, why do they buy things online? And it's not just about cost, it's about other perceptions of legitimacy and other things. And this gave me lots of ideas. And this is part of what I incorporated later in the application. So it was frustrating and at the beginning and scary, but I think it was an opportunity for me to craft a broader and richer application thanks to that. So I strongly encourage applicants to look at the panel and trying to understand, think about how your application speaks to every one of them, right? Of course, you don't know the right people there, and Eamon will talk about this at all, but you can get a sense about the kind of profiles you're going to face in the panel, right? So you want to make sure that you can speak to every one of them and convince them that this is worth funding. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for this very thoughtful presentation. Maria, you are next, so please share your story.
So thanks a lot for inviting me. I'm very glad that Louis went first because he actually covered almost everything. So I don't have to say too much about the practical, let's say, procedures, but I would like to share my very personal story. And I found this is helpful. This is how I learned how ERC is important and what it means to apply and to get an ERC. I'd like also to start by saying that the ERC changed my own professional life. It gave me opportunities that I didn't have before and I couldn't imagine to have without the ERC. Not because it gave me 2 million to work in the humanities, which is an extreme amount of money when you speak about humanities and social sciences. It gives you visibility that you haven't even imagined that you can get as a researcher, especially today that there are so many things that are going on, so many different projects, important contributions from other colleagues. So suddenly the ERC lifts you. Literally, it lifts you up, and when the moment you get it and you are presenting yourself as an ERC grantee, it's very important. You have self-confidence, suddenly that, yes, I made it. And at the same time, as I said, you are very visible. When I started applying, I didn't actually follow any of the advices that we've heard until now. I didn't go to check the EU side about the big challenges. I didn't care about what was important out there. I cared about what was important for me. I was passionate about something, and I wanted an answer, let's say, about something that bothered me in my own discipline. I come from a very different discipline that most of you are. I'm a historian of science and STS scholar, so I didn't apply to the SH1, but to the SH6, which is for history that includes also history of science there. So my major concern was the International Atomic Energy Agency. I'm a historian of nuclear sciences, and I cared about this organization historically. And I also cared about the ways this organization have been dealing with radiation protection. I don't want to go into details about this, but that was my passion, to find out what the role had been of the IEAA in dealing with radiation protection from the time that it was established in 1956, so at the peak of the Cold War, until, let's say, the 80s, and the end of the project was determined by the access to archival material. I had this question, I had this idea, and I said, who can help me to finance this? Because this is a huge project and I cannot do it alone. So who else? The ERC. Why the ERC? Because as we've heard today, the ERC funds basic research. You don't have to have any ideas about the impact of your research into society or why is it important to stakeholders. What you have to prove is that this is really very important in your field, and actually it opens up a new window. This is what it means to be excellent in my perspective. You open up new windows for the younger scholars. One of the questions I got when I was interviewed is what your project is going to offer to the young scholars, not what is going to offer to the society in general, but how are you going to help the people that you are going to employ in your ERC team. In terms also of experience, I applied twice, and I don't know many people that have applied once and got it. The ERC has a saying, rewriting is rewarding, because usually you don't get it the first time, so you have to rewrite it, you have to reapply. I didn't feel that it was a huge failure when I failed, because I thought that I'm trying for something which is way too high, way too important. So, okay, you fail. The first time you fail, you learn how to do it, and then you reapply. Also, by being a woman, and this is very important for the women in the group, the ERC tries to help a lot in terms of gender and diversity and improve research in this respect. But as women, usually, we don't know how to present ourselves. And so we are not as clear, for example, about our own achievements. Or we don't even think that our achievements are so important. And we don't have a good way, I'm sorry. And so we don't have a good way to present them when we go, either we write the proposals or we are going through the interview. For me, the first time was a huge experience. I learned a lot by trying to get it and not succeeding. The interview phase is really decisive. I can say that half of the proposals lose right there during the interview process. But what I learned from the interview process is that you have to be very confident about your own project. This is what you want to do. This is your passion. And when that's the case, then it comes out to the panelists. And I think this helps a lot. I don't want to go forward and for too long about this. What I think it's very important is to leave space for questions. Ask us how we did it. Ask us about the details of this process. I needed 6 months to write the proposal. And I spent a lot of time discussing about the proposal. It's not only writing the proposal, you need to network. You need to get other colleagues to read your stuff, to discuss, and get criticism. And hopefully you can get some very hard criticisms. Be open to this. When people criticize you, this is the most positive thing you can get. That's the main point. I think Luis covered all the practical issues and also Jerko as well. One point about the discipline of management. Thomas started by saying that this is the last kid in the family. Being the last kid in the family, I have the experience that last kids in families are actually better off. Why? Because they have more flexibility. Women, the parents leave more flexibility to the second kids, less, let's say, control and regulation, which means that you have more space to create, more space to bring up new ideas, exciting ideas, innovative ideas. Jerko said that you should start with the idea. I think this is where the most important part of getting the ERC lies, to get the idea, even if it's a crazy idea. And also what is important, as I said before, is to have colleagues helping you. When I started working on the ERC, I was lucky to work with Martin Kurs, a philosopher of science who already had an ERC grant. And so he was the one that helped me find out what the ERC is and write the proposal as well. Also, national contact points. Get to know who is there, what seminars they offer, what you can get out of it. I think that's the main advice is that someone with an ERC grant can offer you. I'm open to questions.
Thank you very much, Maria. And I think what I found extremely interesting is the very different perspectives that the two of you took in your approach. And perhaps this also reflects your different backgrounds from strategy to history of science. But I would like to see whether there are any questions for Maria, because maybe one or two, and then we can move on. No, maybe we can have all the questions during the Q&A session. So thanks for sharing your journey, Maria. And I would like to invite Professor Eamon Scholter from Bath University, a colleague from Bath, to talk about his experience as a panel member in the past.
Sure, welcome everyone. I just wanted to bring up my slides. Can you see them? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, so I wanted to give a bit of a personal reflection on being a panel member. So, panel members are not employees of the ERC. We are drafted in as advisors to the ERC. The decisions rest with the ERC. So, if you have problems with the ERC, it's not my fault. I'm simply a victim of their processes. So I think, it's part of all of us to think about how we use the ERC as a vehicle to advance the field of management research. And that involves tactical changes in how we apply and for proposals, but also strategic pressure on the ERC to become more generous or give us different treatment, get more voices for management in the decision-making process. And I'll talk about my experiences, and I have to say, I have a few scars on my back. It's been a tough road being on these panels. It's not an easy, joyous experience to go to Brussels and fight for 3 to 5 days with 15 to 18 other people in a room who have very different perspectives than you. So, if your projects are not funded, it's not because we didn't try. We tried, we failed. Okay, so it's, the panel is a struggle to go through this panel process. So that my experiences are based a little on my own struggles in this process. So I think it's really important to reflect the fact that the panels are like gods in the ERC decision-making process. The remote reviewers play a relatively modest role in the process. They are not in the room where it happens. To quote my favorite musical, Hamilton. So the remote reviewers only come in the second stage. They're largely appointed and chosen by the panel So the panel has a central role in this process. And I think, as Luis said, you need to think about who is going to be on the panel and what are their expectations. So the way the panels work is it's quite a diverse group of people, lots of different research interests. It's fairly international. There's a degree of gender balance. There's some overlap between panels, but not always. There's always new members coming in. Panel members do not have strong social relationships with each other unless they have a prior existing research contact. So, I might know a couple of people on the panel because we've met up or in my field, but generally I don't know. You walk into a room of strangers and you try to, get along and make decisions together. It's not a very mutual learning experience. It's the hard, dirty work of evaluation. I don't think I'm going to do any research collaborations with anyone I ever met in an ERC panel. So, it's really, the job of evaluation, not the job of, learning. And I do learn from the process, but I don't learn from my panel members, if you know what I mean. I learn how they think about the world, but not, we don't discuss research ideas. So that's now the process in terms of the structure is, as a panel member, you get 15 to 20 applications to review. You get the 6-page B1 and the CV to look at. And then you go through and read these documents, trying to get a sense of whether the project meets the criteria. You have to fill in the boxes, as Luis suggested. I try to focus on the project, not the person. Is it a good project? Is it something interesting? Is it something exciting, something novel? Is it feasible? These kind of things. You get a very diverse array of topics. So, I only probably see 1 or 2 or even 3 proposals in my own research area. The vast majority are not in areas where I have deep subject matter competency. So, I try to be a generous non-specialist. It's not always easy. If you don't have any expertise in an area, it's hard to make statements about the quality. There may be nobody on the panel who's actually an expert in your specific area of research, right? That's just the nature of how the ball. You might get lucky, you have 1 expert on the panel. So all the proposals are reviewed by 4 independent panel members. So there may only be 2 management members on the panel or 3 management members. So it's possible that you're reviewed in the first round by someone who's not at all expert in our area of research. So, the research has to be interesting for them as well. And we aggregate all the scores by averages. So, if you get 1 bad score, it does affect your likelihood of getting through to the next round. So typically the scores come in, we go through the scores, the average scores of the 4 reviewers in the first stage. Then we have a kind of protocol, which is decided by the panel chair. This is all the information I'm giving you is public anyway. So there's no secret sauce here that I'm providing. All of this information is written up in the panel reports. But, we work off from the bottom, and each project is then brought forward to the panel by an introducer, usually someone who's most subject matter expert in the particular topic, and they'll reflect on the comments from the reviewers and also their own comments on the proposal. They're very important in framing the discussion around the proposal. That's why the panel members matter a lot in terms of shaping the discussion. Tends to be most of the effort in the first stage is spent on marginal projects. The debate comes down to feasibility and novelty. This is where some of the discussion gets sidetracked a little bit into the people. So people say things like, oh, they can get it done, because they have a really great research track record. So, the track record of the PI is kind of like a lens through which you view the project. It's hard to see the project without the track record alongside it. The track record itself is not enough. If the project is bad, it will die. But it does give a degree of legitimacy to people who are doing new things and who have a credible track record of doing that in the past and doing good research. And at this stage, we haven't seen the full methodology. So, it's really a little bit of a guessing game as to whether or not the true feasibility of the project can be realized. So then we have a ranking. It's a brutal process to rank all these proposals. Then we have to write comments on every single proposal we reject. And that's a social process where we all stand around a computer screen typing and reading each other's comments. So the comments that go back to the applicants tend to be very cryptic and very short, because that's a kind of collaborative and difficult process. If we take projects to the next stage, then we go out to remote reviewers. That tends to be, like as an editor, you would find reviewers for a journal article. Also, you use the network of different members on the panel. So the second round interviews, about 1/3 of the candidates get to the second round interviews. 1 in 7 are funded, 1/3 are invited for interviews generally. Candidates come in, do their show. They're incredibly well prepared. We see them sitting out in the hallways, nervously sweating, and I have great sympathy and in awe often of their ability to come in and do their show. And it's really impressive and how well spoken they are when they have to do this. Usually the lead questioner is appointed from the panel using the remote reviewers' comments as well as other additional comments from the panel members. And of course, the presentation is, in a can, and people are very good at sticking to the time, but, people have to be able to respond to questions, and the questions are as important as the presentation. There is some common patterns and mistakes that presenters make. They kind of overpromise. They add things that were not in the proposal itself. Remember, you're trying to get the proposal funded, not other things you thought of after you wrote the proposal. Sometimes it can be like 8-9 months from when you put the proposal in the can and submitted it to the ERC. So you've thought of other things, but those are of no use to you because you only can defend what you put in the can 8 months ago. Sometimes we get a degree of arrogance. I don't know if it's nervousness. People are dismissive of panel members and their comments. This happens quite often. So, sometimes people's nervousness gets the better of them. Their insecurity takes hold and they don't grapple with the comments of the panel in a kind of reflective way. It's perfectly all right to say you don't know something or you're going to be working with others who know that better than you. But trying to bluff your way through is often a bad strategy. My experience, presentations really matter. Especially in raising marginal candidates up to the higher level and bringing candidates down. I think, panel members like people with passion, expertise, and who can speak clearly about their subject matter. And I think for management scholars, the presentations are critical because there's a general skepticism of our quality. And so when we put ourselves in front of the panel and people can see people's quality, it is then observed. There's less of this ambiguity, and some of the other members of the panel who may be more skeptical may join in the party. Also, this is often the first chance that people who haven't reviewed these proposals actually get a sense of the proposal. And so this is when the other members of the panel start to get active in the decision making. So you can win friends and influence people in the second stage, and they can be critical because it can come down to voting for the ranking later on. So, if you don't have friends and supporters away from your core area, you won't get funded. There's a lot of brutality in the final ranking, and it can be quite unpleasant. So there's a lot of bad feeling in the room, and you can lose. Good projects get put down the ranking based on the preferences of some members of the panel. So these fights can be quite. I've seen some really unpleasant disputes, personal disputes in these panel meetings. So it's not that people didn't try. That's all I gotta say. All right, so management researchers. I think we have a major problem with management researchers at the ERC and SH1. This is a common feeling among many panel members I've spoken to who represent the management breed. So we have a chicken and a hen and egg problem, a hen and bird problem, as Catherine said. We don't apply, and then we often submit poor applications on the average. And even if we submit a good application and have a reasonable project, we don't even get invited to the second stage of review. So, this is a tough process for us. We're really outgunned. I think there's structural disadvantages we have in the process. One is that we're a relatively small number against a larger number. So, maybe 2 to 4 management sort of people on a panel with 15 to 18 people. And, people in finance are really economists, right? So the rest of the world on the panel really thinks with an economic logic. They are economic man or woman. And they're a tribe, with a strong sense of who they are and what are their standards. And, management is not a tribe. It's a very diverse group of scholars who are more motivated by, more united by where they work than what they study. And we don't have the same sense of allegiance to each other and understanding of each other and the same norms of research. So this makes it difficult for us to kind of cohere and fight back against those who have these strong tribal identities. The other thing is a lot of economists on these panels have very skeptical views of us. This is something Thomas said at the beginning. I think it's really, I've heard this in meetings. We don't, we do consulting. We don't need the money because we're all rich from consulting. Business schools don't do research. Our journals are poor. Our empirical standards are weak. Basically, we don't know how to do good research is often a comment. So I try to fight against this, but I'm only one. There's many other voices, and there's a general view. People have chosen, they've self-selected into economics and away from business schools, and so they can have a hostile attitude to who and what we are. The other advantage they have, and this is a critical one, is they can understand what we do, but we can't understand what they do. So imagine I'm reviewing a proposal, we have a proposal on game theory and a proposal on human resource management. So the game theory proposal is written in a way which is almost incomprehensible for non-experts, right? But the economists love it. And then we have the HRM proposal, which is about human management practices. They can understand it. They think they know what we're saying. They think they know what's important. But, you know, they don't give me the benefit of the doubt by me saying that's really excellent in that field of research. Whereas they're asking for that for game theory. So this tension really, it can be quite stark in the negotiations among the panel members about what should be funded and what shouldn't be funded. So, okay, you know, how do we overcome these problems? I think, you know, there's lots of things that Luis said and Maria said, which I think are really valuable to think about in terms of preparing a proposal. I think people have to think whether or not they actually have a credible shot at doing this. It's not like writing a paper. It's not so easy to recycle. You know, if you fail at one journal, you can go to the next journal. So, you know, I have to think about how much time and effort it's going to take to bid for this and whether you can make a credible case. And I don't think it's worth bidding unless you have a reasonably strong research track record. That's true at all three of the levels. It tends to be we get applicants at the later stages of the starter grant time window, and the same with the consolidator. So, you know, the PI score is very important. And if you don't have a credible research track record, they just won't fund you, right? I'm sorry to say that, but it's true. The other thing, of course, you need a great project. Now, what is a great project? You know, they come in all shapes and sizes. It's very hard to generalize. It's something different. It's something important. It's something that looks challenging, looks unusual. You know, it's got new data. It's got new stories, new something. You know, it's got new notes, new dance steps, whatever the term is. There's a degree of novelty and ambition in the research. It's not a literature review. It's not a filling of a hole in a management literature. It's not an extension of some well-established theory, which you're going to extend to a new area. It's not the importing of ideas from economics into management, which is, you know, we get those kind of proposals. It's not too technical, you know, in terms of people can grapple with it and non-experts can understand what you're trying to achieve. So, you know, it's not all those things, but it's got to be something which really excites the panel and makes them, you know, generous generalists to take it forward. The other thing I think which is critical, and this is a problem with a lot of management proposals, is they have to have a credible empirical design. So economists care about causal identification. You know, and if you have a research study, which is like a descriptive little cross-sectional survey, you know, I studied 100 firms and they told me X, they're never going to find that as credible, right? So, you know, it's really important that you've thought about what would be a credible empirical strategy for an economist, because they won't accept a proposal which doesn't meet their standards. It's just of what they think is good social science. And there's nothing anyone on the panel can do to stop them if they believe this to be the case. Now, there are, you know, mixed methods are fine and qualitative approaches would be fine. But, you know, if it has a degree of quantitative analysis in it, it needs to be, you know, carefully considered and well done. The other thing I think which management scholars get wrong is they always sell their social impact and engagement with practice. This doesn't sell on the proposal. No matter how many times they've been told that this is not a criteria, people still play this song on their fiddle. And it just doesn't work with the panel. In fact, it often spurs the economists to think that we're doing consulting. It triggers reactions of their views about us, about how engaged we are in practice and how, you know, companies should fund this as opposed to the ERC. So, you know, playing the engagement angle hard is actually a disadvantage in this panel. And that's challenging for a lot of people who've been told, you know, or have pressure to do engagement as part of their research practice or as part of, you know, the domestic research council's requirements, such as here in the UK, where you have to write a pathways to impact as part of your grant. You don't need that ERC, they don't need it. And if you have it in your management grant, it's probably going to be a negative factor in the way in which you're evaluated. The other thing is realism. So, you know, do you have a good idea? Is it really a great idea? And could you take your idea into a group of economists? Like walk into the economist coffee room at your local university, tell them your idea, and would they say, ah, that's interesting. I like that research design. That seems appropriate to me. Would they really be dismissive of you? You know, if you can't like walk into the economist tea room with your idea and get some positive feedback, it's not going to do well on the panel. Right, so that, you know, these ideas have to be able to travel into these other communities and seem credible. And if they can't, you know, then you're not being realistic about whether or not this is the right funding mechanism. for you. Now, it may be that in the future, the ERC changes the structure of the panels and we're no longer tied to these economists. But for now, this is the current system. And I think, it's worthwhile, going into with eyes wide open. Okay, that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Simon. Another presentation lifting the curtain, this time from the panel's perspective. So any questions for Eamon? Something you want him to elaborate? No? All right. So in that case,
there are questions.
yes.
There are questions. Javier has his hand up.
Oh,
Maybe you
sorry.
cannot
Yes,
see it.
Javier, sorry, I didn't see your hand.
No worries, Panos. Thank you so much. First of all, I just wanted to thank Eamon truly, sincerely for sharing all this. I think we knew most of it, but not with that degree of detail. And I think from a recent interaction with Giger Answer in another context, it seems to me that this problem of understanding the nature of management research as a field, as a multidisciplinary field, is not only a problem of economists, but also of some psychologists who see the ERC as basically funding basic research and not applied research, and then seeing management as basically applied research, or even worse, as you said, consulting, which is a little bit paradoxical now in economics, given the diffusion or the prestige that the control experiments that Esther Duflo and others do, right? But I mean, my thinking, and I don't know what you think, Eamon, and that's my question, is that there is no way we'll make any progress with the panel being mostly populated by economists. And by the way, I was in a panel for the Norwegian Research Fund 2 years ago, and it operated the same way. I think that the only possibility is that there is a panel in which the different disciplines that underpin management research are represented in a more or less even way. So there is one person trained in psychology, one person trained in economics, one person trained in sociology, one in political science, and maybe few who are trained in PhD programs which are multidisciplinary. But unless, because of course, we also have lots of economists in management schools who might be confounded as management people, and please don't take this badly, right? But who have been trained as economists. And so I think that that's the only solution. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think, my frustrations are not alone. As I said, I think other panel members who've been involved in this process also have, I don't think what I said differs much from what they've said. And we've thought about, trying to lobby the ERC for a more diverse panel. But I think it's worthwhile thinking about, like, the other panels have problems too, so, at coffee breaks, I come out of my panel and I get a coffee and I meet panel members from other panels, and, they have, many more proposals than us sometimes, and they're from very disparate disciplines. There is, I think in those panels, I think they do operate, maybe, I don't know if we get in trouble here, but I do think they operate with a bit of a quota model, in the sense that there's some expectations that some geography projects will get funded and some, sociology projects will get funded. But in our panel, it's a straight fight for resources, with the economists. And, Europe has still, economics, maybe not the biggest growing area of students, but we really have some great economists in Europe, and they do apply to the ERC. So, there's, we're up against, very strong scholars who've been trained in the best methods, who publish in the top journals and design great projects. So, it's difficult to match them, for many management scholars.
Maria has raised her hand.
That's something to add on what Amon said. Coming from, as I said, the SHX, which is history, not specifically history of science. It includes history of science as well. But I think the first time that I presented, I had only one historian of science in the panel. So I say this to just agree that there are problems in other panels as well. The challenge there is to show that your idea, your project can survive in this panel. And to do this, you have to know who is going to be there. Usually we don't know the panelists for that year, but we know the panelists for 2 years ago. And the ERC law, let's say, is that they basically circulate every 2 years. You find the same panelists 2 years later. And I think the best advice is to try to adjust your idea and your proposal to the panelists you are going to meet. That's the best you can do. And this might change in the future if we have more panelists for management or for history of science, but this doesn't really say anything. The proposal has to be very good, has to be excellent, which means it has to be able to survive in a panel.
Thank you very much, Maria. So this gives me the opportunity to ask whether panel members have questions for each other after your presentations, whether you want to interact at all or open it up to everyone.
2 points. I see one question on the chat by Aitor, and he asks, does ERC have a list of past funded projects? And I think everything is fully available on the website, as always when there's public funds involved. And Panos, maybe we can share the link so that it's easily accessible.
Sure.
And as I'm already on stage, I try to take the chance for a question. Because Maria, I liked very much when you were talking about rewriting is rewarding. And as I come from an in-between discipline, between information systems, between computing and business management, even in our national funding systems, we have to get trained how to approach the one or the other side. So I'm wondering whether we as management researchers need more training. And so my question to Amon is, what is your experience? What is the percentage of people trying again and not being offended by a first rejection and then really making the step? So is this a good advice to simply rewrite and it would be really rewarding? Amon, your mic is...
Okay, yeah, I just wonder. Yeah, I don't know the percentages of people who reapply. You'd have to ask Yurko. You know, we just get there and we just participate as reviewers. You know, so maybe Yurko can give us some statistics.
Yeah, sure. Well, the general answer is yes, it helps, and I don't know the exact numbers now, but the success rate for reapplicants is always growing, and it's significant. So a lot of people, as Maria said, don't get it on the first time, but they stay persistent and get it on the second time. I remember one candidate who got it on her 4th try. And when she described her experience, it was similar to Maria's. She said, first time I was just checking it out to see how the whole process goes, how to write. The second time I passed to step 2, but didn't get it, but got to the interview. So the interview gained some more experience. And then in the end, she was funded. So in general, yes, reapplying helps very much. And that's why we provide this written feedback of all the reviewers and the panel comments, even though short and cryptic, point to some, improvements that can be made. And if I can make, as long as I'm already speaking, the history panel is one where I once helped changing a colleague, and actually it's a panel of history and archaeology. So there you have a big fights, and it's nothing compared to SH1. I was there and I was just in shock how this was, because the methods there are very much different from people actually digging the ground and doing carbon dating and all these things, and historians with more, desk-based research. So it's not just, the SH1 panel. There are a lot of disciplines and sub-disciplines, and it's just a practical arrangement of putting all these disciplines into panels. It's, it would be ideal to have more panels, but 27 panels is already a huge logistical undertaking to evaluate. So we are doing our best to accommodate this, and we had people from management chairing the SH1 panel recently. So we are trying to do our best to promote what management scholars to be more visible in this panel.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the floor?
No, in terms of statistics, just a small comment. According to the ERC, if you make it to an interview, you double and you fail, then you double your chances to get it when you resubmit, which is huge. If you think that the overall is 12%, oh yes, going through this for a second time is more promising.
Great. So I would like to invite Thomas to make some closing remarks on the basis of what we have heard today.
Carlos, can I just say one more thing just before you finish up? I think there is a benefit to bidding, even if you're never going to get funded. So we know about this from some research. You know, writing a programmatic idea for yourself for 5 years about what kind of research I want to do, what kind of interesting problems. So doing the ERC as a kind of mental gymnastics for yourself, even if you never apply, is a worthwhile exercise, I think, for people. I think, you know, management scholars tend to be opportunistic in their, at least I am, in their research approach, and tend not to be programmatic. And I think, you know, one challenge for all of us is to try to think more programmatically about our research, and the ERC process will force that upon us. So, you know, I think it is worthwhile intellectually, even if you don't get the money or even apply for the money, to go through this process.
Even better if you get the money, but yes.
Yeah, can I just follow up on this? Because what Arman said is really true. It makes you think of your 5-year research agenda. But also there are some schemes on the national level. I know for Italy, maybe for Spain, where you don't get the funding in ERC, but you went to step 2, they give you some funding. Not to the level of ERC, but with the application passed to step 2, you can apply for national funding and get it. So depends on the country, but there are also these possibilities.
And also understand if your application in various organizations, if your application gets a high score, this is also something that can be helpful for other applications. Yes. Thomas?
I would like to thank all of those testimonies that we got today about how it worked, and it was very enlightening. I personally learned a lot, although I felt I knew a lot already about the ERC scheme, but getting to understand how it's operating behind the curtain, as you said, panels, was very informative. I also had, of course, confirmation of some key points, key aspects of the battle, typically in SH1, of management people with economics and the tribal, the economists behaving as a tribe. By the way, my wife is an economist, and I think my lunch today is going to be a fight, but that's a different matter. Again, it's very useful. As I said in my introductory comment, I think ERC is a blessing. I do think so. At the same time, I think we need to work together to see what can be done for our younger colleagues to work the structural part of it and the panel composition, etc., which appeared clearly. And Arman, thank you for what you said, because it was very, very, I mean, I suspected most of that, but when someone else says it, it's very useful. So again, I'm glad this was taped and will be made available to our members, because at Euram we need to help our audience and our colleagues to draft excellent pieces, excellent proposals for bids for for the ERC scheme.
Thank you very much, Thomas. And Catherine, do you want to say a few words?
Just quickly to say thank you, because as I said in the beginning, we really want to motivate the management research community to engage more in the ERC scheme and at least give it a try. And so it was very insightful for me to learn that it's even rewarding to give it a second try or even more. So I also will take out as a real learning this mental gymnastics, and maybe sometimes in management research we do not do enough mental gymnastics. So thank you for that advice. Thank you for lots of input and food for thought on how to move on. Thank you very much to Jerko, to Luis, to Maria, to you, Amon. I think it was really, really helpful, eye-opening, and I thank you, Panos, very much for making this panel happen. And hopefully it's a first step in mobilizing and motivating our community to engage even more for this really, really valuable funding scheme. Over to you, Panos.
Thank you very much, Catherine. And I guess I would like to thank everyone, the panelists, and the audience for participating. I think today we achieved to get a 360 perspective of the application process and the way the mechanics of the process. And let's hope that we will be able to continue with other initiatives on that direction. So thank you very much, everyone. And we're finishing on time.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Panos.